I'm going to come up here to Tools, and you'll see a function called Annotation. Annotation is going to be adjusting our designators, R1, R2, R3. So I'm going to come here and say Annotate Schematics. Now, there's a couple of options that we'll use here. If I say Annotate Schematics, this is a classic engineering program. It's going to give me a ton of options. How do you want to do it? Do you want to cross and then down? Look at all these options. Do I want to go across and then up? How do I want to do it? I'm going to go across, let's see, and then down. I like that one. And then it says, where do you want to start? Start index of 1, start index of 100. I can do that if I want. If I have more than one schematic, I can start on 100 for schematic 1 and 200 for schematic 2. It gets easier then to know which sheet I'm on when I'm looking at things. But for us, 1 is okay. I'm going to close that. That's if you want to use all those options. The quick and dirty one here is Annotation. Annotate schematics quietly. And by quietly, what they mean is I've already set up those options. I don't need to look at them all again. I'm just going to say do it quietly. It says there's 3 designators that need an update. Do I want to update them? Yes, I do. And now look, R1, R2, R3, and AR1. Now, I don't like AR1. I'm used to calling integrated circuits with the designator of U. So I'm going to look at the property here, and I'm just going to change it to a U, U1. That's what I like. There we go. So now I have resistors, right? Input, feedback, output. I've labeled them. Things are looking better. I'm going to hit save here so I can save my current level of project. Zoom out a little, and always keep in mind we're trying to make a board that has a ability to have inputs and outputs, right? Well, the schematic looks good, but how am I going to get a signal in? How am I going to get power in? I don't have any way to do that here. So let's go back to our components. I'm going to look at miscellaneous connectors. Look at all these connectors. There is a load of them in here. All right, B and C, the very first one on there. The B and C connector is the connector you see on your oscilloscope. B and C. That's the little round connector. You plug it in the function generator, you push it on to turn it. That's a B and C connector. So I'm going to use that for my output. Maybe I want to output as a B and C connector. So I'll double click it. There it is. And I'll stick it here. I'll right click when I'm done. I'll go back to components. And I'm going to say, all right, I want another connector. Maybe I want a 2-pin connector. So I'll come down here for a header. There's a header, 2 pins. You'll see some of them have an H after it and some don't. The H, if I used it, is a header that comes out of the board and bends over 90 degrees. So they're saying the H is horizontal. I'm coming up vertical, I'm going horizontal. So let me just put a 2-pin header in over here for my input, and maybe we'll use the 3-pin header for power, and we'll use the H version so you can see that. You'll see the schematic symbol looks the same, but when we go to put it on the PCB, it's going to look different. So here's our input, here's our output, here's where we're going to have power. That all looks good. I like to use pin 1 for my input and 2 for ground. But look what happens if I highlight this part and rotate it. Now I've just clicked on it to highlight it and I'm hitting the space bar and it rotates around. When I rotate it around, pin 1's on the bottom. I don't like that. I don't want pin 1 on the bottom. I want pin 1 on the top. So what do? Let's hit the X key while it's highlighted. I'm sorry, when I have my mouse on it. Now look, I've rotated or mirrored the X. I can hit it again. I'm back the way I was. If I hit the Y key, I rotate the Y. I'm mirroring the Y side, so I can rotate it over. Either way works. I can now get pin 1 where I want it. The same here. The bottom pin over here, I'm going to move this designator. The bottom pin here is ground. I could wire this coming around like this. It's not going to look that good. Why don't we just hold our mouse key on it and hit the X key, and I can mirror it. So now, look at that. I can hook it directly. It looks much nicer. I'll put that B and C back up here. So So that's one of the functions that you'll use a lot when you're drawing your schematics. Remember that your schematic is your communication document. This is a visual representation of what's going to go on the board, and it's our classic engineering notation. If I show you this symbol, you know it's a resistor. If I show you this symbol, you know it's an op amp. One thing we don't want to see in these courses is somebody putting this symbol down and saying, oh, well, it had the right footprint, and so I just put this down, but it's really a diode. Or they put this one down. Oh, yeah, I put that down. I'm using a photo sensor. I just put this down because it had the right footprint. That's a mistake. In industry, they'll fire you for doing that, because this document, when you hand it to somebody else versed in the art, they're going to look at it and say, oh, a header. I know what that is. It's a 2-pin header. And then the other guy says, oh, no, not really. That's actually a connector to go to an SD card. What? No, that doesn't work. Use the right part. You'll see as we go along that there's a lot of options here, and we can make things look correct and point to any footprint we want. We'll get there, because you'll see we're going to change some footprints. So here's my header. I have options to change this. If I look at the properties, you'll see where it says header 3. Maybe I want it to say something else, like power. Now it says power. Easy to change. Here's another one, right? This one says header 2. I can change it here, or I can come here and click this and highlight it and say input. Very good. Easy to adjust. So let's wire this up. We want to wire our connections here. First thing I want to do, I think, is I'll put ground. I know I'm going to need a ground here, and I'll put the middle pin as ground, but I'll drag it down a little bit here because we're going to add some more parts later. And I know I want this guy to be ground, and I know I want this guy to be ground, and I will eventually wire this across. Oh, let's wire these up. Here's my wiring tool. There's ground hooked up here. Here's ground hooked up here. Now, this is not connected across. I'm going to show you another way to connect it. In this very small project, it would be a little impractical, but I'll show you how to do another way that can be useful in larger projects. I'm going to tell it place a net label. Right there, a net label. This one currently says SEG5. That was probably the last net I used. If I hit tab before I place it, I can change the properties. So here's the net name, highlighted already. I'm going to call it INPUT, input. Now it says input. I can hook it right here. See the big X show up when I hook it there? There we go. Now if I put it like this, it's hard to read. It gets in the way of the designator. It's also on top of the symbol. I can rotate it, or I can place it here, and I can take my wiring tool and wire over to it. Now, this node is connected to this node by using this net name. This gets handy when you have a lot of connections. You can name the nets, move them across. You don't have to look at all of them. It's tough to have all the wires going all over. We want to make this as readable as possible. So let's see, I'm going to put my power ports on next. That's going to be another important thing. So power ports, I can tell it place, power port, it's a ground. Maybe I don't want it to be a ground. I want to place power, so I'm going to hit tab before I place it, and I'm going to change the style. Let's see, I want a bar. And I'm going to call this net name plus 12 volts. That looks good. So I'm going to say OK. Now here's the net name. I'm rotating it with a space bar. I want it over here. I'll stick it over here. And I know this guy is going to get plus 12 volts on him. So let me come up here and maybe I'll place it right here. So I got my two plus 12s. Now here's what's handy. I'm still placing this. I need a negative rail too. I'm going to hit tab, come over here and change my net name to minus 12 volts. Very good. So I can place this guy over here. I can rotate him and stick him down here. That looks good. Let's get our wiring tool. Look at that. I got 12 volts coming here. These are wiring up pretty well. That's not bad. But look, red squiggly lines. Altium's warning me. Hey, you got a problem. Is this what you really want? No, not what I want. I'm going to go to Tools, Annotate, Annotate Schematics quietly. Fix those. Now I have P1, P2, and P3. Let's hit Save. Alright, so there's a rough schematic. I have power coming in. I have input resistors, output resistor, feedback. Here's my op amp. Everything's looking kind of good.